The snow began as a gentle murmur, a faint sigh across the twilight sky. By the time the sun surrendered tonight, it had grown into a blizzard, its icy fingers pressing against every window pane in the Stewart home. Inside, the family gathered close, wrapped in the warmth of their small, simple rituals. A crackling fire, steaming mugs of cocoa, and the scent of freshly baked gingerbread wafting through the air. Lily, the youngest, sat apart from the others, her nose nearly touching the frosted glass of the bay window. Beyond the shivering panes, the world was a swirling void of white, where snowflakes fell in hypnotic, endless patterns. Her eyes, bright with curiosity, darted across the shadows that danced along the edge of the yard. "Do you see anything out there, Lily?" her father asked, his voice gentle but tired. He didn't wait for her reply, returning his attention to the book he held loosely in one hand. "There's something strange," Lily whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. Her breath fogged the glass, obscuring her view. She wiped it away with her sleeve and leaned in closer. I think there's a sleigh." Her words pierced the comfortable quiet, drawing the attention of her brother Henry, who was sprawled on the rug, his hands clutching a controller, engrossed in a game. He scoffed without looking up. "A sleigh? In this storm? It's probably just a shadow or a tree." "No," Lily insisted, her voice tinged with wonder and something else. "It's not just a shadow, it's glowing." This made her mother glance up from her knitting. "Glowing," she repeated, half laughing. But when Lily turned, her expression was so earnest that her mother rose from her chair and joined her at the window. Outside, under the pale, spectral light of a full moon, something did gleam. It wasn't just the snow, though it sparkled like crushed diamonds. No, there was something more. A dark shape etched against the brightness. Its edges shimmered faintly, as though it were caught between the worlds of dream and reality. "It's real," Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother frowned, the laugh now gone from her lips. Henry, his curiosity finally piqued, groaned as he stood, shuffling over to peer outside. He was about to dismiss it as a trick of the light when his breath caught in his throat. There, in the middle of the yard, stood a sleigh unlike anything he had ever seen. Its frame, carved from wood that gleamed as if polished by centuries of stars, was adorned with strange symbols, runes perhaps, or something older. The rails rested lightly on the snow, yet no tracks led to it. It simply was, as though the storm itself had conjured it from the ether. But what drew their gaze most was the figure standing beside it. Draped in a cloak that seemed woven from frost and shadow, the figure's face was obscured, save for eyes that shimmered with an otherworldly light. It stood motionless, like a sentinel waiting for a call that only the Stewarts could make. Who would come out in weather like this? Their father murmured, now standing behind them. His voice faltered as the figure turned its head, ever so slightly, as though it had heard him through the glass. The family drew back instinctively, their hearts racing. But Lily, ever braver than the others, pressed her hand to the window. "It's waiting for us," she said simply. Her words hung heavy in the air, filling the room with a strange electricity. No one dared to speak, as if breaking the silence might awaken something too vast to comprehend. "Don't be silly," Henry finally said, though his voice betrayed his nerves. "We can't just go out there. We don't even know what it is." But Lily's mind was already made up. Before anyone could stop her, she turned and ran for the door, her small frame slipping into the cold night. The others called after her, their protests swallowed by the wind. When they caught up, the figure by the sleigh was watching Lily with an unreadable stillness. She stopped a few feet away, her breath coming in frosty clouds. The sleigh seemed to hum faintly, as if alive. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice clear despite the storm's howl. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it raised a gloved hand, offering it to her, and by extension to the others. The family hesitated at the edge of the yard, torn between fear and fascination. Then, as if compelled by an unseen force, they stepped forward, one by one, drawn into the circle of magic emanating from the sleigh. As they climbed aboard, the storm seemed to still. The world grew quiet, as though holding its breath. And when the sleigh's reins were pulled tight, the ground beneath them disappeared into the void, and the sky unfolded like a map of endless possibilities. The journey had begun. The sleigh moved as if carried by an unseen current, weightless, gliding over the snow without so much as a whisper. The Stewarts clung to each other, their breaths caught between wonder and unease. The cloaked figure sat at the helm, its posture rigid, hands gripping the shimmering reins. It did not speak, yet its presence filled the air with a gravity that was almost palpable. The world around them blurred, the blizzard dissolving into streams of light and shadow. The sleigh no longer felt tethered to the earth. Beneath it, the snow gave way to a churning sea of stars, vast and infinite. Time itself seemed to lose its shape. Moments stretched and twisted, folding into themselves like silk ribbons in the wind. "Where are we going?" Lily asked, her voice trembling but fearless. The figure turned slightly, its gaze meeting hers, and though it gave no answer, she felt an understanding bloom within her. This was a journey not to a place, but to places. A passage through something far older and deeper than the family could comprehend. Henry shifted uneasily, his fingers gripping the edge of the sleigh. "This doesn't make any sense," he muttered, though his words were drowned by the hum that surrounded them. The sleigh's rails glowed faintly, as if responding to his doubt, and the runes etched into its frame pulsed with an inner light. Then, With a sudden jolt, the motion ceased. The swirling void peeled away, revealing a scene bathed in the golden glow of firelight. The air was cold, but carried a rich, earthen scent, mingled with the faint sweetness of roasting chestnuts. The Stewarts blinked, their eyes adjusting to the change. They were no longer in their quiet yard, nor in the endless expanse of stars. Instead, they found themselves in the heart of a bustling medieval village. The streets were alive with celebration. Revelers in brightly coloured garments danced in circles around a towering bonfire, their laughter mingling with the deep, resonant notes of drums. Children chased each other with sparklers, their faces painted with patterns of holly and ivy. At the centre of it all was a wooden effigy of a goat, adorned with garlands of dried berries and golden straw. "What is this?" their father murmured, stepping cautiously from the sleigh. He paused, as if half expecting the world to vanish the moment his feet touched the ground. But it did not. The scene before them was as vivid and tangible as the snow that clung to their boots. "It's a Yule celebration," their mother whispered, her voice tinged with awe. "A festival to welcome the winter solstice." As if in response to her words, the villagers turned their faces toward the Stewarts. Their expressions were kind but unreadable, their eyes glittering like embers. They gestured for the family to join the circle, their movements fluid and almost otherworldly. Lily, ever curious, stepped forward first. She let herself be drawn into the rhythm of the celebration. Her small hands clasped by two villagers as they spun her around the fire. Henry hesitated, his gaze darting nervously to the cloaked figure still seated in the sleigh. But eventually he followed his sister, pulled by a strange mix of reluctance and intrigue. Their parents exchanged a glance, the unspoken question between them. Is this safe? But something in the air, something ancient and enduring, reassured them. They joined the festivities, their fears melting away like frost under the warmth of the fire. The night deepened, and the Stewarts lost themselves in the timelessness of the celebration. They tasted spiced mead from wooden cups and listened to stories of the sun's rebirth, told in hushed tones by an elder wrapped in furs. But just as they began to feel at home in this strange, enchanting world, the bells began to toll. The sound was unlike anything they had ever heard, rich and resonant, each chime echoing as if it was striking the very fabric of time. The villagers froze, their joyous expressions fading into solemnity. One by one, they turned their faces toward the sleigh. "It's time," the figure intoned at last, its voice low and melodic, like the first breath of winter. The family exchanged uncertain glances, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that this moment, fleeting and magical, could not last. Reluctantly, they climbed back into the sleigh. As the figure took the reins, the golden glow of the firelight began to dim, and the village dissolved into mist. The Stewarts felt the familiar pull as the sleigh surged forward, lifting them once more into the endless expanse of stars. They didn't speak, each of them lost in the echoes of what they had just witnessed. Only Lily, her eyes wide with wonder, dared to break the silence. Where will it take us next? The figure did not answer, but the runes along the sleigh's frame began to glow more brightly, their patterns shifting like the surface of a river. And as the stars around them grew brighter, the Stewarts felt the unmistakable thrill of the unknown tugging at their hearts. The sleigh moved once more, this time with a deliberate, almost solemn pace. The stars that had surrounded them dimmed, replaced by a soft twilight that seemed neither here nor there, neither morning nor evening. The world outside the sleigh blurred, colours bleeding into one another like watercolours left too long in the rain. There was no sound but the steady hum of the sleigh's runes, their glow casting faint shadows on the faces of the Stewart family. They didn't ask where they were going this time. Something in the air, ancient and unyielding, told them to wait and see. The figure guiding the sleigh sat motionless, its posture exuding a quiet authority that was both comforting and unnerving. Then, like a curtain lifting on a stage, the haze parted and the sleigh descended. They landed in a garden shrouded in snow, its trees bare and skeletal, their branches adorned with glowing lanterns. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of incense and cedarwood. Ahead of them, a family dressed in delicate, flowing kimonos knelt before a small altar. "Where are we?" Henry asked, his voice hushed. "Japan," their mother replied softly, her eyes fixed on the scene before them. "A Shinto celebration, I think. Perhaps the New Year." The family approached the altar, their footsteps silent on the snow. The Japanese family didn't look up, their attention fully on their offering. Carefully, they arranged bowls of mochi, mandarins, and rice wine before the serene statue of a deity draped in ribbons of white and red. The children clapped twice, their small hands echoing through the stillness, then bowed deeply, their faces solemn with reverence. The Stewarts watched in silence, a sense of peace settling over them. Lily, her heart open and unguarded, stepped closer, drawn by the soft glow of the lanterns. One of the Japanese children, a girl about her age, noticed her and smiled, a small, fleeting gesture. Without words, she reached out and handed Lily a piece of mochi, its surface dusted with fine white powder. Lily hesitated, glancing back at her family, but something in the girl's gaze urged her to accept. "Thank you," Lily whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of the moment. The girl said nothing, only bowed before returning to her family. As the bells of a nearby temple tolled, the air seemed to shimmer. The snow at their feet sparkled like crushed glass, and the lanterns swayed gently in a wind that no one could feel. The Stewarts sensed the pull of the sleigh behind them, as though it were calling them back. "Come," the cloaked figure said, its voice low and resonant, carrying a tone that brooked no argument. They returned to the sleigh, their hearts heavy with the bittersweet knowledge that this moment, like the one before it, was fleeting. The sleigh surged forward again, faster this time. The air around them grew warmer, filled with the scent of spices and citrus. When they landed, it was under a sky awash with colour. Fireworks painted the heavens in brilliant hues of red, green and gold, their explosions echoing like distant thunder. They had arrived in 19th century Victorian England, though they could not have known it by name. The cobblestone streets were lined with cheerful crowds, their faces illuminated by the glow of gas lamps. Children held sparklers, their laughter mingling with the joyous melodies of carolers dressed in heavy cloaks and bonnets. Stalls brimming with roasted chestnuts, sugared fruits, and mulled wine filled the air with a warmth that seemed to seep into the Stewarts' very bones. "Look," their father said, pointing to a grand procession making its way down the street. At the centre of it was a magnificent sleigh, much like their own, though it lacked the ethereal glow. Its driver, a jolly man in a red coat, waved heartily to the crowd, tossing candy to the children who ran alongside it. "Father Christmas," their mother said, her voice tinged with wonder. This must be how they celebrated. The Stewarts wandered through the streets, their senses overwhelmed by the vibrancy of it all. Henry stopped to watch a group of young boys playing a game of blind man's buff, their laughter infectious. Their mother marvelled at the intricate decorations in the shop windows, each display more elaborate than the last. But it was Lily who noticed the woman in the shadows. Dressed in black, her face half hidden beneath a veil, she stood apart from the revelry, her gaze fixed on the Stewarts. When Lily met her eyes, the woman nodded, a subtle, knowing gesture. Before Lily could say a word, the bells began again. These were deeper, more resonant than before, their sound rolling through the streets like a tide. The festivities froze, the revellers' faces momentarily caught in expressions of joy and surprise. The air shimmered, and the sleigh pulled at the Stewarts once more. As they climbed aboard, Henry turned to look back at the frozen tableau, his brow furrowed. "Do they know we were here?" he asked. "No," their father replied, though he sounded unsure. Maybe they weren't meant to." The sleigh began its ascent, the stars rushing to meet them. Lily clutched the piece of mochi tightly in her hands, its sweetness lingering on her tongue. She turned to the figure at the reins. "Where next?" she asked, her voice soft but eager. The figure didn't answer, but the runes on the sleigh began to glow brighter, their patterns shifting and rearranging. The Stewarts felt the familiar tug of time unravelling, and they braced themselves for the next fragment of the endless tapestry. The sleigh moved with a sense of urgency now, as though it carried a burden heavier than the Stewarts could comprehend. The stars outside their orbits spun like pinwheels. and the vast expanse of time and space rippled in their wake. Each moment seemed suspended, caught in the delicate balance between presence and memory. Lily sat with her hands clasped around the small piece of mochi, now slightly softened by her warmth. She gazed up at the cloaked figure, its silhouette merging with the glow of the sleigh's runes. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice almost drowned by the hum of their motion. The figure didn't turn, but Lily felt an answer resonate within her. It wasn't a name, not in the way people understand names. It was more like a feeling, a force older than words, tied to the roots of stories that humanity had long forgotten. The figure was a guide, a keeper of paths unwritten and unseen. The sleigh slowed, the hum softening into silence as they descended once more. This time, they landed in a clearing surrounded by dense, frost-laden pines. Above them, the sky danced with ribbons of green and violet light. The aurora borealis, alive and pulsing like a heartbeat. At the center of the clearing stood a gathering of people cloaked in thick furs, their breath visible in the icy air. A great fire burned in their midst, its flames licking the sky with an almost defiant energy. Around it, the group moved in a slow, deliberate circle, their voices rising in a rhythmic chant. "What are they saying?" Henry asked, his voice a whisper. "It's not words," their mother murmured, her eyes fixed on the dancers. "It's something else. A prayer, maybe, or a song for the gods." The family moved closer, the firelight casting long shadows across their faces. The figures around the fire paid them no mind, their focus unbroken as they lifted their hands to the heavens. At the edge of the circle stood a tall figure draped in white, their face painted with swirling patterns of black and red. In their hands, they held a carved staff crowned with antlers, each tine adorned with charms of bone and stone. "It's the solstice," their father said, his voice heavy with reverence. "This must be how they honored it, before the stories we know, before everything." The cloaked figure stepped down from the sleigh for the first time, its presence commanding but not intrusive. It moved to the edge of the firelight, its shadow mingling with those of the ancient celebrants. For a moment, it raised a gloved hand, its gesture both a greeting and a farewell. The leader of the circle, the one with the antlered staff, turned toward the figure and nodded, their expression solemn. Then, with a motion as fluid as water, they threw a handful of something, herbs perhaps, or crushed stone, into the fire. The flames roared upward, and the aurora above flared brighter, bathing the clearing in an otherworldly glow. The Stewarts felt the ground shift beneath their feet, not physically, but in a way that unsettled the mind. Time, already pliable, seemed to stretch and fold, each moment layered with echoes of the past. The fire, the chants, the aurora, all of it was part of something vast and unbroken. a tradition carried forward in countless forms across centuries and continents. The flames dimmed, and the dancers slowed their movements, their voices softening into whispers. The antlered figure turned back to the fire, their task complete. The Stewarts felt the pull of the sleigh once more, insistent but gentle, like a tide drawing them back to the sea. They returned to their seats, their hearts heavy with the weight of what they had witnessed. The sleigh rose into the sky, the aurora fading into the distance. For a long moment, no one spoke. Even Henry, usually quick to break silences, seemed lost in thought. What were they praying for? Lily finally asked, her voice small. For light, their mother said after a pause. For the sun to return, for hope. Lily nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon, where the first hints of a new destination shimmered into view. The sleigh's descent this time was gentler, the transition less abrupt. They landed in the courtyard of a brightly coloured village, its buildings painted with vivid murals of stars and flowers. Laughter and music filled the air, and the scent of tamales and hot chocolate drifted toward them. It was a posada, a Mexican celebration alive with joy and tradition. Families gathered around glowing lanterns, their voices raised in song as they reenacted the story of Mary and Joseph's search for shelter. Children darted between the adults, their eyes alight with excitement as they awaited the breaking of the piñata. The Stewarts watched from the edge of the crowd, their presence unnoticed in the lively chaos. A woman holding a tray of steaming mugs approached them, her smile warm and welcoming. Without a word, she handed them each a cup of rich, spiced chocolate. "Thank you," their father said, his voice thick with gratitude. The woman simply nodded, her smile lingering before she disappeared back into the throng. Lily sipped her chocolate, the warmth spreading through her chest. She looked up at her family, their faces illuminated by the golden glow of the lanterns. For a moment, they felt not like strangers, but like participants in something far larger than themselves. When the bells tolled again, they returned to the sleigh without hesitation. The runes glowed brighter now, their patterns intricate and alive. As the sleigh lifted into the sky, Lily turned to the figure at the reins, her voice steady. "Where are you taking us?" she asked. The figure's silence was its answer. The sleigh surged forward, its path carving through the tapestry of time, and the Stewarts felt the threads of countless traditions weaving around them, binding them to the story of the world. The sleigh ascended once more, its course invisible yet deliberate, threading the Stewarts through the boundless expanse of time. The air around them thickened with an eerie stillness, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the glowing runes. Though the family had grown accustomed to the strange cadence of their journey, a quiet unease now took root in their hearts. They had witnessed so much, moments of celebration, rituals of hope and reverence. But something about this final leg of their voyage felt different. heavier, as though they were nearing the heart of the story itself. The stars around them began to fade, replaced by an all-encompassing darkness. It wasn't the void of space, but something more profound, like the ink of a quill poised to write the first word of a forgotten tale. The sleigh slowed, its rails gliding softly to a halt, though there was no ground beneath them. The family looked around, searching for the next destination, but there was nothing. No sound, no light, only the faint warmth of each other's presence. "Is this the end?" Henry's voice broke the silence, carrying an edge of uncertainty. "No," the mother whispered, her eyes narrowing as she gazed into the void. "Not the end, the beginning." The runes on the sleigh flickered, their light dimming, until only the faintest traces of their glow remained. The cloaked figure, who had been silent and still for so much of the journey, finally turned toward the family. For the first time, its face became visible, though what they saw was not a face at all. It was a shifting mosaic of light and shadow, a reflection of all they had seen and all that had yet to come. "You have seen the threads," the figure said, its voice layered as though it spoke with many voices at once. "Now you will see the loom." The darkness around them began to stir, coalescing into shapes both familiar and alien. The Stewarts found themselves standing in the middle of a vast cosmic hall, its walls woven from strands of light. Each thread pulsed with a rhythm of its own, carrying fragments of stories, traditions, and memories. They saw the Yule bonfire burning among Norse tribes, the flicker of lanterns in a snow-covered Japanese garden, and the brilliant hues of fireworks over Victorian streets, all of it intertwined, inseparable. "This is the heart of it all," the figure continued, gesturing to the web of light. "A tapestry woven across time and space, each thread a story, each knot a connection. You are part of it, as are they." The Stewarts stepped closer, their eyes wide with awe. Lily reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing one of the glowing threads. Instantly, her mind was flooded with images. A child in a distant future unwrapping a holographic gift. A family in a distant past sharing a feast under the light of the solstice moon, and countless others, each moment vivid and alive. "It's all connected," she said, her voice trembling. "Every Christmas, every celebration, it's all the same, isn't it?" "In essence," the figure replied, its form shifting as it spoke. "The rituals change, the faces change, but the spirit remains. The need to connect, to hope, to light the darkness. This is the thread that binds them all." The family stood in silence, their hearts swelling with the weight of the truth before them. The tapestry pulsed, its glow intensifying as if responding to their understanding. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, the hall began to dissolve, the threads unraveling into light. The sleigh beneath them stirred, its rails vibrating softly. "It is time," the figure said, turning back to the reins. You have seen what you were meant to see. The journey back was quieter than before. The family too lost in thought to speak. The sleigh moved with a gentle rhythm, carrying them through the thinning veil of night. When they finally descended, it was not to a distant land or a forgotten era, but to their own snow-covered yard. The house stood as they had left it, the windows glowing faintly with the warmth of the hearth inside. The cloaked figure stepped down first, holding the reins with an air of finality. It turned to the Stewarts, its form flickering like the last embers of a fire. In its hands, it held a small carved object, a miniature Yule goat, its surface etched with stars. For you, it said, extending the token to Lily. She took it with trembling hands, the wood warm to the touch despite the cold. A reminder of the threads you now carry. Before they could respond, the figure stepped back into the sleigh. Its form grew fainter, dissolving into the fabric of the night. The sleigh, now empty, shimmered briefly before vanishing, leaving no trace in the snow. The family stood in silence, the stillness of their yard a stark contrast to the journey they had just taken. Finally, Lily looked down at the carved goat, its intricate patterns glinting in the pale light of dawn. Do you think anyone would believe us? Henry asked, breaking the quiet. No, their father replied, his voice soft. But it doesn't matter. What we've seen, it's ours. As the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, the Stewarts returned to their home, their hearts forever changed. And though they didn't speak of it often, each of them carried the memory of that night like a secret flame, a light to guide them through the dark. Some nights, Lily would sit by the window, holding the carved goat in her hands. She would look to the sky, half expecting to see the sleigh reappear. And perhaps, in a way, it did. Not in the form of glowing rails or a cloaked figure, but in the countless lights that adorn the world. Each one a thread in the endless, luminous tapestry.